Melba, I think I have to do this again. Hi, I'm Mary Joggiel, PTDA Foundation Program Director. On behalf of the Foundation, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Effective Teams in a Remote Work Environment, which is being brought to you by the Foundation's PT Workforce Recruitment and Retention Tools Committee. All attendees are muted to eliminate background noise. We won't be using the raise hand function, but if you have questions during the webinar, please submit them by using the questions panel you see on your screen. We've reserved time at the end of the webinar so your questions can be answered. Today's presentation and recording will be emailed to you early next week. These will also be available in the webinar archive of the PT Workforce section of the website. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Melba Holt, CEO and founder of Pays Leadership. Before founding her company, Melba worked for Command Industrial Technologies and has much experience in the PTMC field. Melba, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon or good morning to you wherever you sit today. It is absolutely my pleasure to be joining this team and to be invited by the PT Workforce Group, excuse me, to come and present to you today. I certainly have fond memories of working within this space and working with companies during my time at Command Industrial Technologies. And so this is a bit of a homecoming for me. I see that we still have a couple people trickling in, and so I like to take a moment and have a poll launched. So Mary, if you could launch our first poll, which is around mood. And what I'd like you to do is to answer these questions for me. It's just one selection as the poll comes up, and I would love for you to tell me how you're feeling today. How you're feeling today. So if you had to report the weather on your mood, what would it be? Blue skies and sunshine. That means everything is awesome. It's off to a good start. And positive about a good finish. A tad overcast means, okay, maybe there's a couple of hurdles, but you're feeling great, that things are going to turn out the way you need them to today. Scattered showers is just that. A little good, a little bad, but we're making it. Thunderstorms, okay, maybe it's a little bit more on the challenge side than the positive side, but so you may be ready for the day to be over, and tornado means all hell is breaking loose. So just another few seconds here before we close the poll. Tell us how you're doing today. All right, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we'll close the poll. All right, Mary, are you able to show our results here? Okay, well, the good thing is most of you are feeling pretty good about the day, which is awesome for a Friday afternoon. And I don't know what your weather looks like. It seems like it's got a little bit of everything going on across the country. I am located down here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've got blue skies and a nice breeze. So most of you are feeling good. A couple people feeling like there's some challenges, but you're going to make it scattered showers. So that's the good thing. We don't have anybody in the thunderstorms or tornado. So that's a great place for us to jump into our content here. Thank you so much for completing that poll. So now I'm going to jump in and just get started. This year, as we sit here in November of 2020, I don't think any of us could have imagined what this year would be. Mary, can you take down that poll? Okay, thank you. We couldn't have imagined, this time last year where we would be in 2020. There's been so much to happen over the course of the year. The biggest being COVID-19, right? We had no idea what that was in January, started to hear a little bit, country went into shutdown mode in March. And then here we are sitting in November, hearing every day that the numbers are continuing to go back up and we're possibly in our second wave and within the pandemic. So that certainly has affected us this year. We've seen the stock market have a drop and then rally back, and we're waiting to see what's going to happen next. We then have, still a bit in an election season, right? We just had election day last week. We've still got some elections taking place, counts going on, and undoubtedly anytime that's going on, that's a distraction within the workplace. We've seen businesses start to close over 2020 as a result of, not being able to survive the pandemic. And then we've also seen social unrest across the country this year, just by, numerous things that have happened across the country. So with all these things that have happened, we've shifted to going into this remote working environment. And then while in this remote working environment, and dealing with just not being able to go and do the things that we do every day normally, if you will, and I do normal in air quotes, we also have all these other things that are stressors, in addition to whatever your home situation is, right? Working with your kids in the background, or having to find childcare if you're an essential worker, or, whatever the situation is. It's just been a lot. And so we thought it would be a great topic. We've adjusted maybe some to this remote work environment, but are we just surviving it, or are we thriving in it? And so what I wanted to talk to you about today is really how you can move to thriving effectively with your team in this remote work environment. So I'm going to speak a lot today around some data that sits from the Virtual Teams for Dummies book that was written by Tara Powers. And so if you're interested, I'll put that out there. You can go purchase it off Amazon or somewhere like that. But in this book, Tara Powers did some research and talked with teams. This was well before the pandemic. She did this research back in 2016, and she surveyed hundreds of people who were either on virtual teams or leaders of virtual teams. And she found out, what are the challenges that exist for these teams? And so I'm going to show you this slide here because there are some differences between what newly formed teams go through and what established virtual teams go through. And so where you are in that spectrum, I'm imagining that you started working home, in a virtual team sometime this year. Perhaps you've been working for a virtual team for years and years. So when you look at the newly formed teams, those of you who just went to this year, you may be experiencing some of these. The top challenges, as we look at this bar chart, are effectively using technology. And the blue bar stands for the people who actually were on the virtual team. The orange bar is for those who led a virtual team. And you can see that was the top challenge for both of them, effectively using technology. The next challenge, setting up a communication plan. So making sure that you're able to keep in touch with everybody across the team and people are getting the right information. The next challenge, while it was a bit lower for those who are actually on the virtual team, it was higher for the leaders on the virtual team, was getting the right resources to help support the team. Next in line, number 4, was setting behavioral norms for the team. And then the last one was establishing policies and processes. And again, you can see the uptick there on that being more of a challenge for the leaders versus those who were members of the team. So now, if we look at what the challenges are for established virtual teams, it takes a little bit different of a lens to it. And so the top challenge, keeping the team engaged. It wasn't quite the highest for those on the team, but it was definitely high for the leaders. Communication came in right behind that. Actually, the highest for the people on the team was communication. If we think back to the previous one, setting up a communication plan was a challenge for the new virtual teams. And so as they were established, communication continues to be a theme there. Unlocking creativity of the team. No one on the team had any problem with it, but the managers were seeing, leaders of those teams were seeing that, that creativity was stagnant. Next, holding team members accountable came up, and then followed by managing conflict. So I look at those holding accountable and managing conflict. Those are in a similar vein of, right, just how do you know what people are doing and hold them to what you need. Those link back to the establishing policies and processes and setting behavioral norms within the previous slide as well. So while they're phrased differently, the challenges for virtual teams really remain the same. Technology, communication, and accountability. So I'm going to take a moment and ask Mary to launch our very next poll for us. And I just want to know where your team is in its virtual team journey. About how long have you been doing this? So if you can take this poll and let me know when your virtual team was established. Did you do it because of COVID-19? You were virtual before COVID-19, but only for a year or less, or, have you been doing this for now almost a couple of years? You've been doing it for over a year prior to COVID-19. So let's take a moment and go through that. All right, another few seconds to complete that. Okay, we can close the poll now. Share results. All right, so 80% of you stated that you went virtual because of COVID-19, which was my suspicion coming into the call. 13% you were already on a virtual team for a little bit of time prior to COVID-19, and then 7% of you have been working in a virtual team for some time over that. So I would still call you, if you went virtual because of COVID-19, this is going to be helpful because there may be some things that you skipped. We were forced to, we had very little time to adapt. So maybe now is the time to go back and figure out how you put some more things into place. All right, Mary, we can close the poll, the results. Thank you. Okay, so first we're going to talk about technology and talk about where you need to be. We're sitting and using technology right now, right? We're here on a GoToWebinar, which is an effective platform for many people to gather and to receive information. But there's lots of technology that's available out there, right? And so I would encourage you to be thinking about, perhaps your company just said, hey, we've already got access to this thing, so we're going to just start using that. Maybe it's going fantastic. Maybe it's not going great at all, right? We've probably all become power users in whatever technology we've chosen in the past 9 months, right? But it's time for a technology audit and for you to figure out, is your technology serving you in the way that you need it to serve you? And so going through this set of questions will help you understand, why are you using what you're using, and is it actually meeting the needs that you have for your organization, right? So have you selected technology? I'm gonna say yes, because we were all forced to select some technology. So what did you select? Does it meet the needs of your team? Is it reliable, right? We know there are platforms that are better than others, or are you using something that's hard for people to connect depending on where they are, or to upload files or share things? Is it reliable? Do you have everyone using the technology, or do you have some folks that are resistant to that technology? And if they are resistant, understanding why that is. Is it just that they don't, love technology and so they're having trouble embracing it? And if that's the case, working with them to push them over the edge, that'll come up more in the accountability section as we go along. Or is it that the technology, they really don't see that it's meeting the needs, right? And understanding their feedback so that you guys can figure out the right solution for you. And then after auditing what you do have, what needs still remain? Okay, we've got a great platform to actually see people, right? And that we use Microsoft Teams or Zoom or GoToMeeting. And so we're using the camera. However, we lack a file sharing technology, right? that's still a need that exists, right? So really kind of doing this audit of where you sit and what's the effectiveness of what you currently have and what still exists out there. And then once you've figured out what your needs are, here's some solution ideas to go through. And this is just a few, but let's go through some sample issues. So if you have something that still remains, say the first one is you have a team that's unclear about who is assigned to what task and small details are falling through the cracks. They don't know what's going on when, right? Perhaps you need a project management technology, something like a base camp. Your team needs a way to communicate quickly and informally throughout the day. Usually some kind of chat or instant messaging technology is best for that, right? So are you using Skype or Slack, or do you have instant messaging? My team needs to know where people are when they travel and when people are available or on vacation. So the right technology for that is some type of shared calendar, right? So are you using a Google Docs, or are you sharing Outlook calendars? Something of that nature. Your team has issues with version control on documents, right? So you don't know what's the latest or most current version and has the most accurate information. A document library might be what you need. So that may be a SharePoint or a Dropbox, OneDrive. The team needs a place where everyone can meet on projects, share ideas, and then also collect the notes all in one place. That may be a team discussion board. So again, getting back to Microsoft Teams or Google Docs, where you can match that information. So really taking some time to look at what's out there. I mean, there's a lot of things that are free or very low cost. Looking at what that cost is for your organization, total organization, or is it something that you can put in place with IT approval just for your group to test or pilot the solution. So that's the first part around technology. Now let's start to talk about communication. Technology is one way to facilitate communication, but there's a number of different ways that we've got to also make sure that communication is happening in a way that makes sense and is effective for the team. When we talk about communication, it's one of these things over my entire career, I've always heard, like, there's not enough communication. Doesn't matter what organization I've been in, what team I've been on, or if people felt like they were doing an outstanding job on it. It always stands out as something that people feel like they need more of. And part of that is because communication includes so many things. And so I like this chart because I think it's a great visual of all the different factors that need to be considered when you're thinking about communication, right? Are you determining, is this a video call, or are we going to just jump on and have an old-fashioned telephone call, or should we be doing something else to communicate? Is it just an email? When people think about communication, we don't typically think about all these pieces, but they exist within it. Is it something that's internal message, or it's an external message going to customers or vendors? Is it something that is formal or something that's more informal? And are you choosing the right, way to communicate that? Is it something that is more official business or unofficial, off the record? Who is it going to within your organization? Is it a vertical communication that's going up and down the organizational hierarchy, or is it something that's just staying, local and within, a certain level or job group within your group? Verbal, oral, there's the nonverbals, right? The body language, listening, all those things that go into what communication is. And now that we're in a remote work environment, it's important for us to remember that 65% of all communication usually comes in the form of nonverbals. That's your body language, your facial expressions, the gestures that someone's using. And so if you're not taking the opportunity to use that camera or use video technology within your organization, you could be missing out on 65% of what people are actually communicating. So figuring out that method that's best to use comes with figuring out what it is that you need to communicate. And so what I have here is a chart that shows different methods that we use within communication and some things to think about and how effective each form of communication is, depending on what it is you're trying to get done. So at the very top row, we see here, if you're trying to make quick progress on something, meeting in person or having a face-to-face, right? We love that. We miss that. We want to get it back, but we know it's limited. You're going to have great results from that. An audio call, picking up the phone and talking to somebody is going to allow you to make quick progress on that. A video call, same thing, right? A go-to meeting or Skype or Zoom meeting, you'll be able to do that. An email, that's going to be pretty limited to make quick progress on something unless you guys have a great kind of system or agreement to where you're going to respond to emails very quickly. But usually that provides very limited ability to progress things quickly. And then chat is an okay way, right? It's a bit informal, depends on what it is that you'll be looking at. If you need to reach a lot of people, obviously face-to-face or just one phone call is going to be pretty limited for you, as well as chat, unless you're able to get into some kind of group chat. A video call or email is going to be able to allow you to broadcast to a lot of different people. You got to reach people that are in different time zones efficiently, right? Your best option is going to be email. Video call, I would say, is behind that, right? But you would have to have multiple of them to be able to hit people in a way in the time zone that's most convenient for them. But every other way is pretty limited in being able to reach people in a different time zone efficiently. If you've got frustration, or it's a topic of frustration, or it could be some tension with what you're bringing, right? Email is not going to be the best way to move forward on that. You need to be able to, hear or see what that person's bringing. Again, that face-to-face would be great. Video call would be next to that in my mind, and then a phone call after that, right? So that you can pick up on that 65% of the nonverbals that we talked about not so long ago. If you need to build trust, email and chat, not necessarily the way that you're going to go, but again, going back to those phone calls, being able to hear the tone, talk things through with someone. So figure out what is the best way for you to communicate, depending on what the message is that you need to communicate. Here's another way for you to think about choosing the proper method. And this is to think about it in the relationship of what's the risk to the relationship if there was a miscommunication that happened, which you see there on the bottom. So if somebody read it, you sent an email and they read it and they misunderstood what you were trying to communicate, is this something that's going to completely blow up for your relationship, or is this a relationship that you have a great rapport and they would be understanding? So what's the risk of the relationship? And then on the other side, what's the chance of misunderstanding, right? And figuring out where you need to fit your communication method in with this virtual team. And so the higher the relationship risk, the more you should lean towards something that's going to get you in front of the person. And that would be video, or in rare occasions, face-to-face. If there's a high chance of misunderstanding and a high relationship risk, then you absolutely have to try to, be face-to-face or be in that video, so that you're both able to communicate and check for all of the nonverbals and make sure that there's full understanding of what you're going through. So those are some resources for you to think about as you go about communication before you just jump into, oh yeah, I'll just send an email, or let me just leave this voicemail for that person, or let me text them, which in my mind a text would be equivalent to, doing a chat or something of that nature. So think about what it is you're communicating and how sensitive that information is before deciding where you're going. Another part of communication usually lies in, are you having effective virtual team meetings? And so if you haven't been having team meetings, you're missing, a huge opportunity to make sure that everyone is aligned and having that opportunity to share information in an effective way. If you're having team meetings, check and make sure that you've got all the proper pieces in place to maximize the time that you guys have together and ensure that everybody gets what they need. one of the first things that you need here is an agenda, right? So I will say over the course of my career, I tend to be fairly informal and I don't always love having an agenda. However, anytime I've been on an effective team, people want to know what you're going to talk about. And it's good for you to have that in front of them in advance so people can come prepared. That's good even if it's in person and it's not a virtual team. But making sure you have that agenda, you send it out in advance. There may be a chance to have some standing items so people know, right? Hey, we're reporting out on this every time we come together. But make sure that that doesn't take up the full amount of time and you have some space created within that team meeting to bring some levity, right? People have a lot going on. We're all in situations that are different and we're handling it very different. You know, for some being home, working from home, they're like, I would like to never go back to the office. Others can't wait to go back to the office. Some, you know, are trying to homeschool kids while they're working through the day. So everybody is in different situations. So making sure that there's space within that meeting for there to be some levity and some grace for, you know, who everyone is as a person, as a human. So here's some ideas for you. You can make themes for your video meetings. So you can have a day at the beach backgrounds, right? And people can choose their favorite backgrounds. If you don't like that idea, I know some people just completely hate the idea of those virtual backgrounds. Make sure you make some space to celebrate wins that the team has, right? So don't just make it so serious, so you know, straightforward that you're not taking the moment to pause and celebrate the wins, no matter how small they are, because people need that. They need to see, you know, that there's some light in what they're doing. Also, make sure that you provide some space for small talk within that as well. So, you know, when people were going into the office, most people didn't just go straight, sit at their desk and never talk to anybody throughout the day, right? So the disappearance of that water cooler talk or just know what's going on in people's lives, make sure that you create a little bit of space for that. It shouldn't dominate the meeting, but it should be some time for that. The next piece is to go through and create norms with your team. And I'm a huge advocate for this particular one here because it helps everyone to be on the same page for how you're going to communicate, by what method and for what purpose. So it's the team agreement around these things. So there's communication norms. Here's a couple examples of communication norms. You can require that if people are sending something that requires, you know, a deadline for something to be sent, you can say, hey, we're all going to put that in the subject line. And so a sample subject line could read, request for info due 11/20 at 5 p.m. Eastern. Right? It's clear. It's right up front. It can't be missed, and you can track it in your email system. Right? Another communication norm is you can say, hey, everybody's gonna, you know, we're gonna say, is this a email that's just an inform or it's something that's requesting information? So the one above it was request. Here's an example for an inform email. So you can just say, hey, it's inform volume data for the Northeast, right? And that lets people know that, okay, maybe I don't need that. I sit in a role where I don't need that data right away, or I sit in a role where I need that right now. So I know to go and look at that immediately. So it allows your team to be able to quickly look at and prioritize what they're going to be able to do with those messages as they come in. So that's just a couple of communication norms. Some meeting norms that you could have, right? These are important whether in the room together, but definitely on a virtual team meeting, right? So are you allowing texting during meetings, right? That can become distracting, even on video camera. If people, you can tell that they're texting or their attention is taken away. Another norm that you can have for your virtual meetings is that the camera must be on, right? However, I would say if your organization has a lot of meetings back to back throughout the day, you got to figure out how to address video fatigue, right? So perhaps it's, we're going to have our cameras on for these meetings, but when we do staff meeting, you don't have to have your camera on, right? Or, you know, you don't have to have your camera on while we're doing introductions, but when we get to this point in the meeting, we need everyone to have the camera on. So there's different ways to to make sure that you're keeping people engaged, but also just being understanding of these different, times, the differences and nuances that apply to a virtual team. The other thing I would say is virtual team building is still important. So your culture still matters. People are coming to work for you for a reason, right? Paycheck may be part of it, but that's usually not what keeps most people. It's the people that they're working around being challenged, feeling good, feeling like the company cares, their coworker cares. And so make sure that you're still being intentional about building the culture and making sure that you're extending your culture in these virtual times. So, I was having a conversation with a client just last week, and they were talking about we're missing the opportunities for, the group lunches within the team and to be able to just talk. Okay, well, maybe you send everyone on your team a gift card for lunch or maybe some snacks, and you say, we're going to use this on this dedicated day and we're going to have lunch together. So it's a way that you're extending that culture building in a unique way to the virtual team, but you're not losing it completely. Another thing, again, is back to that point of allowing that downtime virtually. You may just have a virtual session that is a happy hour or focused on fun. Make sure that you have activities. You can choose, a little bit of team building and activities that everyone can participate on. I use one as an icebreaker, or sometimes just with my teams around, hey, I put a map up of the world, and I say, show me, marked for me where you would like to be today, right? It doesn't have to be where they're sitting, but tell me where you'd like to be. And then we just talk about fun, lightly what that means. Hey, I would love to be at the beach today because it's snowing here. That has actually happened already this year in many places. So give that space for people to be able to talk about what's going on in their lives, share ideas that are not work related, and just, talk about what this adjustment has been to, their lives, both at work and at home. So much to take in. Our third area is accountability. And, sometimes organizations have trouble holding people accountable when they are face-to-face. And so I imagine that becomes even tougher in the virtual world, right? And so as we think about accountability, I'll go back to the concept of team agreements, and on that earlier survey, how it was a challenge to set those team agreements, and then accountability came into it. When teams have clear agreements set, there is some pretty clear benefits that come from the team. And this was, again, from the same research that was done by Powers Research Institute that did the earlier surveys. Teams with clear team agreements were 18 times more likely to accomplish their goals. So if you take a moment to think about that, right, that's clear roles and responsibilities and everybody knowing what they're supposed to be doing. They're 28 times more likely to be highly productive, right? Again, not wasting time trying to figure out who's on A, and who's on B, and I do this piece and you do that piece. And then 39 times more likely to come up with innovative solutions. So clearing the space for those, the tasks to be done and spending more time being able to be in that point of clarification, that point of innovation, that point of brainstorming and creativity. So these team agreements are living documents that govern the team, and they cover a number of different things. So if you don't have a team agreement in place, I really encourage you to jot this down. Mary, said that these slides will be available here next week. Take the slides down and go back and do them. It includes first the team's purpose, values, and vision, right? That can be for the organization, and then what does your team do that exactly, leads into that? Roles and responsibilities for the members, so that it's clear who's supposed to do what work. It states your goals. It includes the measures of success that you're using to judge the team. And then it has those operating guidelines. And so part of those operating guidelines I hit in the communication area, section, which were around communication norms, the tech guidelines, and team meeting guidelines. The next part, so setting out that agreement, if you don't have it, it's something that you can work and, having maybe a couple hour session to talk about your team agreement. Maybe you already know the vision and the purpose, but you guys need to hash out the roles and responsibilities. Spend some time, no one person or not just the team leader needs to be putting that together, but instead the team needs to create that together. So spend some time building that. And then it's about ensuring success to that accountability, right? You have to hold people to what you came up with as a team in the team agreement. And it allows for not just the leader of the team to hold people accountable to that, but it also allows for each of the members of the team to hold each other accountable to it. So to me, when you think about a functioning, effective team, there's nothing better than when the team says, let's go back to the example of we're going to put deadlines in the subject line. Hey, we said that we're putting deadlines in the subject line. However, Tom, you sent through an email, and yes, you did put a deadline. It was buried, in the third paragraph of your email. And so I missed it. I apologize. And, I missed it. However, you also didn't do what we agreed upon. That should have been right up front, and I would have known to get to it. So it creates a space for the team to hold each other accountable, but also for the leader to manage performance to those team agreements, right? And making sure there's adherence to it. If someone is consistently not following something that you agreed to, that could become a performance issue, and it should be documented as such. You should also check in periodically, right, on those team agreements and for feedback, right? Hey, we're all doing a really good job of doing this piece of it. Seems like we're all struggling with that piece of it. What's the feedback? Do we need to change something here? Do we need to adjust the goal, right? Because sometimes we create goals that I would say are more aspirational, and then we have a really hard time actually holding up to that goal. And that's okay. Just don't let it be like a year that passes by, but instead check in maybe quarterly to see how things are going against these agreements. Make respect a non-negotiable, right, for your team, and you can write that right within your agreement. That's a foundational principle, making sure that everybody understands what respect looks like for the team, that it, looks like not talking over people in your meetings. It looks like you're not doing things that may be seen as disrespectful on your camera. It looks like a whole lot of things. So make respect a non-negotiable. And then help people to remember, although maybe you're not going into the building, but all of the company policies still apply. Right? All the company policies still apply. And if you're still having issues, I say keep calm and call your HR team. They are still available. Yes, everybody's busy. Some of you have had to cut your teams and maybe are leaner than you were when you started the year. However, they are still there to help you work through these things. So that's our content for today. We can open the floor for questions. Mary, want to tell the group how they can submit questions and let me know if we have any?
You can just type in your question into the questions box there. At the moment, we do not have any that I can see. So I'm really not sure if anybody has questions or not. But I have a question.
Okay, great.
You talked about team agreements. And is there some kind of time frame? Like, would you keep an agreement out there for, a year, or would you have shorter agreements or what?
I would say that's the point of the check-in. So set the agreement. It may be something that becomes an agreement for the next 2 years, but so go into it thinking about it's for the longer term, but put check-in points, formal check-in points into it on a quarterly basis so that you give yourselves the opportunity to adjust if needed. And recognizing that when you get new team members, you have to onboard your new team members to the agreement that the team has come up with. And after they've had a little bit of time to understand what's going on, that may be another time to have another check-in point to see there are adjustments that need to be made.
I still don't see any questions in the question box. Do you have
Okay.
anything else you want to tell the people about about teams and something that's been successful for you? I know you're on your own, but you have had teams in the past, correct?
I definitely have had teams in the past. I've had managed remote teams before, COVID-19. And what I gave you today are the tips that really help to make it work. And so I've been a member of a remote team. I've led a remote team. And then, of course, I've been on teams that are, located all together. And what I would say, one thing that I didn't point out here is, but it's important to remember, is if you do have maybe a portion of your team that's remote and some portion of your team that actually have the ability to get together, make sure that you're creating space for those people who are not with those folks who are together are still feeling included, and they don't feel like there's a clique or that they're outside of the circle. And so I've seen that in the past where that can become a problem. So let's say you've got, a group of people who are in, the corporate office, and then a couple people who are separate. The folks who are not sitting at the corporate office may feel like they're a little bit distanced from the team because there are those, hey, I walked in that morning and said good morning to somebody, of course, 6 feet away now. And so we got into a conversation and we started talking about this issue, and we think we came up with a problem. You don't want to stop that, but stop to think, oh, you know what, this is a conversation that we need to have, Sue in. And so let's give her a ring. Let's see what she has to say. And remember that you can call those people who are not in the office just as quickly as you can stop by the office of somebody who you're in the office with. So I didn't put that in there, but that does come up from time to time for you to think about and make sure that those people are not feeling left out.
Still no questions, but I have one. I'm the question lady today, I guess. You were just talking about hybrid teams. Is there something that you would do differently than what we've talked about already if you are totally managing a hybrid team, rather than just everybody's remote or everybody's in the office?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways you can think about managing a hybrid team. If you have a hybrid team, as a leader, you've got to make sure that you're not spending more time with one over the other. And so, you can tend to over-index with the person who's remote, right? Because you're feeling like, oh, when they're not in the office, I'm going to make sure they have what they need. Or it can be that you tend to over-index with the person who's in the office because you just see them more. Make sure that you're splitting your time, equally and fairly across your team and providing everybody what they need. One way that you can get around that is everyone can act like they're virtual, right? And so perhaps you don't have a meeting in a conference room, but all of your meetings are over GoToMeeting, and everybody's called into the GoToMeeting, right? So that it creates that same environment for everybody who's on the team, and some don't feel like, oh, okay, well, they're having sidebar conversations there, which, by the way, I've been a part of and is super distracting to the people who are on the phone or on the other end of that. So that's a tip that you can think about if you've got a hybrid team. But these team agreements, clear roles and responsibilities, making that space for fun and levity, but clarity, they're all they're all, regardless if it's a virtual team or a hybrid. All
There
applicable.
is a question from Rick, and he wants to know about the use of webcams during virtual meetings. Would you use it all the time? Would you have people shut it off a little bit, give it a rest? I mean, I think sometimes we get so engrossed with the video portion of it that we get kind of tired of looking at the screen.
Yeah, that's the video fatigue that I talked about a little bit earlier. And so, you know, it does get a little tough to sit there on camera all day long. And so it is okay for you to say, you know what, for this one, how about we not do the camera, right? Especially if you're having frequent meetings with the same people, right, over and over again. If you're meeting with people, so let's say your day, you have 4 video meetings over the course of the day. One is a staff meeting. You guys are meeting weekly on video, right? Perhaps you do every other staff meeting with the camera off, right? You can put that in place. One of your meeting is a meeting that is quarterly, right, with a group. That's probably not the meeting where you want to say nobody has their camera on. That's the meeting that you want everybody to have the camera on, just based on the frequency of how often you're talking and seeing each other. So absolutely, it's okay to put some guidelines in there for, yeah, let's take a break from the camera. You know, we get it, we want to see everybody, but it does get tiring through the day.
And we do have a question from Missy about how do you address technical difficulties that members may be having out there?
Ooh, that one's, it's a great question and a tough one because it depends on what the technical difficulties are. So I'll talk generally, and if Missy, if you want to put some more detail around the type of technical difficulties in the chat, that would be great. But so if you're on a call and somebody's having trouble, say, connecting their sound, right? You can spend some time troubleshooting with them, trying to get them to get their sound. What I've done in those is sometimes you just, you know, you're suddenly 5 minutes in and you're still trying to focus on this one person, but you don't have much time for the meeting, so you got to get it started. So I've asked someone to offline with that individual. Hey, why don't you, Steve, can you text with Missy or get on, with her offline and see if you can help her get her sound together? Because sometimes it's, it's all kinds of things. It just doesn't want to connect with your computer audio, or there's an echo that's providing to everybody, and you got to figure out your mic situation. So finding someone who is tech savvy enough that can work with them offline while the meeting's going to go, and they're not going to miss too much of the content. That's one way to handle that. If things are getting too far out of control, sometimes you've just got to shut it down and come back to the meeting. Nobody ever wants to do that, but if it's, a key stakeholder that you need on the meeting, let's say if we were having this webinar today, right, and Mary and I were really struggling to get me online, right, we practiced and we were here early to do that, but it would be very hard, right, with us trying to fumble through this and get the webinar started and going. So sometimes you've just got to call it and say, okay, we'll regroup, apologize if it's significant technology issue. If it's, hey, you've got a file share and somebody can't access the file, okay, well, can, again, someone that's not sharing their computer screen offline and send it directly to that individual, or you just go with showing it on the screen. So it really depends on the nature of what the technology issue is.
And I don't seem to have any other questions here. So if you want to just do your end part, and then we'll close the webinar for the day.
Well, thank you for those questions that did come up. There's so much to what's going on here with virtual teams. And so I want you to have my information. Feel free to reach out if you or your team needs some help. We do also offer a program for first-time managers of people that we run, and our registration will be opening here soon. So check us out at our paceleadership.com website, or feel free to reach out to me directly at melva.holt@paceleadership.com. And I'd be more than happy to work with you and your team. Thank you again, Mary, for the invitation. It's been a pleasure to come back and talk with this group. I miss working with the group, so I'm here as a resource if you need me. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank our speaker, Melva Holt, and all of you for attending today's webinar. As we said earlier, we will be sending an email with links to an evaluation form, the presentation, and the recording, but that will go out early next week. So again, thank you all, and I'm going to close the webinar now.